One of the most important things when it comes to tracking your ROI with digital marketing, or really any marketing channel at all, is to make sure that you set your attribution up early. Of course, being able to attribute the performance of your marketing back to the spend that you've invested is always going to be one of the best ways to improve your ROI over a long period of time. One of the important things to keep in mind as you're beginning your campaign tracking and setup is that it's really tough to go back and add attribution after the fact. An example of this would be maybe with a paid search campaign. If you're running call tracking, for instance, if you have one call tracking number that you use for all your paid campaigns, going back 6 months later and trying to answer a question like, which region drove the most calls or which campaign was most successful is really, really tough because you've basically got one bucket of calls for that entire channel. A good way to do this is to go back over your last 6 months of marketing data and try to kind of come up with questions you don't have an answer to today, but that you'd like to be able to answer in the future. So as you're planning your marketing budget, particularly with ROI in mind, I like to think of everything, of course, in terms of a sales funnel, and you're going to have some marketing channels that are higher up the funnel, some that are further down. My recommendation in terms of growing the actual performance of your strategy is to saturate your funnel from the bottom up. And what I mean by that is to start with the channels that are most likely to drive an actual sale or conversion, and then begin slowly, incrementally moving that budget up in those channels and tracking that performance really closely. If you've done a good job with your marketing attribution, you should be able to see what's performing well and what isn't. And as that budget continues to move up, at some point, you're going to have a point of plateau, meaning that you continue to increase the budget, but the results don't improve. And at that point, basically, I'm moving up to the next channel in my funnel, but continuing to saturate and prioritize the ones that are most likely to drive that actual business result that I'm looking for. So as you're planning your marketing investment throughout the year, my best recommendation is to be as proactive as possible as opposed to being reactive to the immediate results that you're seeing. There's always going to be economic headwinds, tailwinds, changes, from a seasonal perspective or industry-wide that could impact the output or performance of your campaigns. And the best recommendation I can make is to plan ahead and then be consistent with your spend throughout the course of the year. If you do feel that you've got maybe some additional budget or you'd like to see some faster growth, then I would look to double down or reinvest when the sun is shining, meaning you're increasing that budget in the times when things are already performing well. There's a few reasons for that. One, it limits your risk for maybe reinvesting or overinvesting in a channel that hasn't historically performed as well as it should. But it also gives you the opportunity to increase that budget and double down on the areas that you have some consistent recent performance from. It sounds almost contradictory because I am suggesting a little bit of a reactive approach there, but the recommendation would be if you find yourself with some extra money to spend from a marketing perspective, you can be reactive to the positive results, but you want to double down or reinvest in the channels that are performing well, whether or not they're performing well because it's a seasonal change or because you're seeing some macroeconomic trend. But continuing to invest money in those times when the sun is shining is going to be the best way to maximize your ROI throughout the course of the year. So it's important to think of your business development funnel as a single function or capacity. And typically that means including not just your marketing channels and those individual returns, but also looking at what happens with those leads or sales past that initial point of inquiry. Something that I think a lot of people don't talk about is the capacity or availability for either additional leads or additional sales on the delivery side of the business. As you begin to see this increased performance from a marketing perspective, things are going really, really well. It's important to make sure that you have an eye on what sort of availability you have, maybe in terms of either products, service technicians, or just salespeople to take those leads that are coming in. Because if you potentially overinvest or overclock that marketing to the point where you don't have the capacity in the back end to actually, field the output, you can put yourself in a position where you do, see a good return in theory on paper, looking at the Google Analytics data or whatever you use for your marketing tracking, but you may not see the actual business impact in terms of revenue and profit that you're looking for if you're not able to service the leads that are coming in. What this means for a lot of businesses is keeping an eye on their, product availability, staffing, et cetera, and then adjusting that spend throughout the year based on who's busy, who isn't, what territories have capacity, which ones don't. And this can certainly add a little bit of overhead from a marketing planning perspective, but can help maximize the overall ROI because you're putting that budget where it's most needed, as opposed to strictly looking at the marketing metrics as a measure of that overall performance. So as you're doing your annual budget planning, one of the best things you can do is keep roughly 5% of your budget available for testing new tactics and new channels. So if you keep the exact same strategy over a long period of time, you're going to see diminished results if you're not continuing to innovate. That testing budget is frequently for either territories, keyword groups, audience groups, or just different bidding or targeting metrics. You can also use that to test different landing pages, different creatives, and it may all happen within the same ad platform that you're using for that kind of core evergreen strategy. It lets you get that insight and get that data without necessarily sacrificing any of the performance. And what I found is that if you don't allocate that budget up front and don't kind of plan around having those tests going, you're going to have a harder time throughout the year pulling money away from something that is performing to kind of allocate it and use it for that future forward testing. If you're going to run these testing campaigns, keep in mind that really what you're paying for is the information. Every now and then you're going to have a winner, and that's something that you can then kind of incorporate and scale into that overall kind of evergreen strategy. But if you find that you're doing these tests and the output of the result is that you're just not really seeing the performance, then thank goodness you only tried it with 5% of the budget, and that data and that insight is what you're paying for.